I remember when I first learned that people considered Azur Lane to be a bullet hell. Granted, my experience with Toho and me enjoying it like I did, I didn't really see it. I mean, okay, I'll give the EX modes a pass with that since some of them can be rather difficult until you learn the pattern. However, other than that, I can't really say this game is much of a... Oh, good lord. Everything is dead. Are you gonna save some for the rest of the fleet? They kinda need more experience than you do, you know. Alright, up next is one of the Sakura Empire's leaderships, and a powerful one at that. Today we're looking at Ijn Nagato. Now, Nagato is an SR battleship that coming from the Ink-Stained Steel Sakura event, but will eventually be added in permanently. Soon, TM. Now, we've covered a good number of battleships already in this series, but how does Nagato compare against them? Will a big surprise come in small, lowly-sized packages? Did I really just say that? Really? Let's take a look and see if she can hold up to being the flagship of the Sakura Empire, before Akagi and Kaga. Starting off the bat with survival stats, Nagato sits at a nice almost 7,000 health at level 100. This feels about the average health pool out of most of the battleships we've seen so far, save for obviously Bismarck and Tirpitz. Now this health pool combined with heavy armor will allow her to be a rather tanky character to have in your backline. The only major weaknesses that come with heavy armor is the vulnerability to torpedoes, and battleship AP guns can still hurt them decently. Much like most battleships, her evasion is low, but feels to be about average in all honesty. Compared to other backliners, she's more likely to be hit, but is about equal when it comes to her companions. Lastly, her anti-air is really low. Both the Sakura Empire and Ironblood struggle with anti-air, so they are both more vulnerable to airplane-based attacks than those in the Eagle Union or Royal Navy Arsenal. So you may need to account for that if it's absolutely necessary. No, Sandy, it does not always have to be you. They can use a lot of other things as well, you know? Share the stage for once. Now, on the offense side of things, Nagato has a firepower stat that feels a tad bit on the low end, even so that Amagi actually does beat her barely. Now, granted, that could mean that she does less damage than most ships, but we'll have to weigh in other factors as well. Her reload also feels a tad bit low, and is once again beaten by Amagi. Now, the difference is in reload here, for the most part, won't translate to much of a difference in fire rate. But ultimately, she will be the last one to fire if they're all using the same weapons. Now, speaking of weapons, in terms of efficiencies, Nagato's main gun has a slightly higher efficiency than most at 135%. This means that she could outdamage a few of the other battleships, especially those with similar firepower stats. Her secondary DD/CL gun also is higher than most at 210%. This will allow her to do more damage when she needs to use those guns for defense. This can also help to clean up any ships that break through your vanguard, especially with her 2 additional gun mounts. Lastly, her anti-air gun efficiency sits at the average efficiency of 100%. This really isn't a bad thing if it wasn't paired with her relatively low anti-air stat. So she may not contribute as much as other faction battleships can in the air defense part. Overall, stat-wise, she seems to be a bit weaker than some of the battleships from other factions. Now, when we look at her at level 120, we can still see some of the issues she can have. Her anti-air doesn't get much of a benefit from the jump in levels, as it still lags behind a lot of the other faction ships. Her firepower does get a boost, but still remains relatively low in comparison to other battleships. However, her health pool does get a pretty good boost, and her evasion actually does better when compared against other ships as well. Nonetheless, her stat line isn't particularly impressive on its own. One character I can compare it to here is Warspite. No, not the retrofitted form, that's a different rarity. And no, not that one wait, that's not even a form, that's just a meme form. Get out of here with that. Anyway, in Warspite's video, I mentioned that Warspite has a decent neutral game. She doesn't have to rely on skills to do decently with the setup that she has. Nagato here doesn't get the same benefit, but that doesn't mean that she's bad. As usual, skills can make or break the character. So let's see how this ends up. Nagato's red skill is Big 7 Sakura, which gives her up to a 40% chance to fire a special barrage when firing her gun. The damage of the said barrage is based on this level of the skill. Now hear me out on this. While the barrage chance is low, when it procs, Oh my god, I can almost guarantee that every enemy on screen will be dead, save for like a boss or if she's fighting underleveled. This barrage is of no joke. It can and will absolutely devastate anything that is on the receiving end of it, regardless of if it is PvE or PvP. This barrage is probably one of, if not the most, deadliest barrages a non-PR ship can give you. Now, there is one thing that I want to mention. This barrage is a frontal barrage, meaning that it originates and goes in front of where she is at. Most people will tell you that this cements her at a flagship role, and it honestly does. Being the flagship means that this barrage will tear right through the middle of the screen and hit pretty much about everything. So putting her in the other two backliner spots, the top or bottom, will hamper the effectiveness of this barrage, so it's best to avoid doing so. Now granted, if you're using more than one frontal barrage character, you're gonna have to pick and choose who you want to use. Now her second skill is 4th Combined Fleet Flagship, which only procs when sorted as the flagship or, in this case, the middle backliner. When active, she buffs all allied Sakura Empire ships by increasing their firepower by up to 10%, as well as their reload and accuracy, or as we know it as hit, by up to 20%. She will also boost the damage of any carriers by up to 20% as well. This is a leader skill, and while the buffs for other ships are nice, it's more focused on buffing carriers. Originally, when you saw Nagato in a fleet, you'd see it paired with Akagi or Kaga. Granted, now things are a little bit different, but there is still usually a carrier around with her. The focus on carriers is a nice touch for Akagi and Kaga, who already benefit with working with each other by having more aviation on top of their already fast first strike. Outside of carriers, the skill will help battleships and your frontliners as well. This skill does provide some nice benefits, but does in a way limit its effectiveness to Sakura Empire heavy fleets. Other factions will not receive these benefits, so it should be considered if you are looking to maximize the effectiveness of this particular skill. Overall, Nagato is a pretty solid backliner to work with. Her stat line might not be the most impressive one to work with, and it does have a weakness to air-based attacks, but her skills can help with making up the difference. Now, it may be best to look into something to accommodate this weakness, either utilizing carriers, Isuzu, or even San Diego if needed. Just keep in mind that Sandy won't benefit from Nagato's skill, and to be completely honest, Nagato's barrage is actually going to be the star of the show. Sorry, Sandy, that's not happening. Now, the next question is whether she's a boss or a mob fleet backliner. Well, yes, Nagato is good at either of them. As a leadership with a decent support skill, she can make a backline relatively strong against bosses and or mobs. She by herself can still chip in some damage, but not as much as compared to other battleships available. Her barrage does have a low proc chance, but the sheer power of it will significantly damage, if not kill, anything that opposes her. Nonetheless, her support skill does request the use of other Sakura Empire ships, especially carriers, so it may be helpful to consider characters within that particular faction. Now, it is not mandatory to use only those particular characters, but having them around to obtain the boost is nice. Now, granted, it's also not a huge buff, so you could just have her around for her red barrage skill. But at the end of the day, don't mess with the fox loli. You'll regret it if you do. And that will be all for Nagato. Hope you enjoyed and that this will help you in your future endeavors. I do have a running list of ships that I will be working with, and the link is in the description below. If you have a ship that you would like to see that I have not covered, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Up next, I'll be covering Helena's retrofit, and then moving on to my next random pick, which will be Admiral Yes, you. Anyway, I'm covering Admiral Hipper next. Now, whether you're a regular viewer or a patron supporting the channel on Patreon, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again real soon.